So far, we've really only looked at the CRM view of the customer screen. And I'm about to click something, and we'll see what happens here. It's a good time to talk about log out. Oh, I'm actually still logged in. So the system does still have the idea of if you are inactive in it for too long, it will log you out. Now, that's so that we can maintain our PCI compliance. However, there have been some things that I think are drastically improved with that. When you're logged out, one, there's not multiple logins to get back in. There's just the one. Two, when you log back in, it is going to take you directly back to the screen we started on. So instead of having to go back to the main menu and navigate back into what you're doing, it's actually going to take you right back to the screen you left. While we're talking about being logged out, this is a good time to talk about this, some of these features up in the corner here. The first button you'll see is the logout button. Now, it is the web, so you can just close your browser using the X in the top corner. However, I still advise people actually use this logout button. And the reason being is that if I close my browser, it is not going to warn me if I have unsaved data on the screen. However, if I click my logout button, it will warn me that I have unsaved data and then suggest that I actually save the screen before logging out. This icon right here is going to let you know that the integration is turned on with Outlook. This is your training videos. And this thing right here, this little color box, as you may have noticed in my little test world, I've actually turned my account to green so that I can tell the difference between these two. So you can actually come in and set your color. For some reason you don't like the blue. You actually have to look at the screen all day. So we do allow you to change it. And they are adding colors all the time. Currently you just have the choice of these four. And I have your account in dark blue, or default blue. This is specific to you. So if you choose blue, someone else can choose purple, and the next guy can choose green. Or you can choose this shades of gray color. So far, like I said, we've really only gone to the CRM view. And I kind of skipped over this at the beginning because I wanted to come back to it right now. There's this little tab group here that says Customer View. And we've really only gone over this one right here. So what we're going to do is we're now going to hop over to a couple of these other views. The next thing we'll look at after we look at these views is we're going to go into reporting, and then we'll stop and we'll look at a little bit of a Q&A if I missed something in a report that you really want to go back and look at. So the first tab we're going to click is this Accounting tab. And what this is going to do is it's going to display the same information, but in a little organized in a little bit different way that might be more useful to me. It's also going to add a few fields. So you can see the first thing it's actually showing me is an aging. If they had any bills due, there would actually be an aging here. However, this client is very good at paying their bills, so they have no aged invoices. As we scroll down the screen, we are actually going to see a list of their invoices. Because there's no aging, there are actually no open invoices, but we can look at this paid invoices screen. And I can actually see every invoice that's been going out and whether or not it was paid for. Going forward, as billing is completed in the system, a PDF of the bill that's sent out will actually be stored right here. Going back, this is actually not going to work. So some of these will just be broken links, but as billing is completed in the system going forward, these PDFs will actually store here. So if you're on the phone with a client and they're talking about a specific invoice that they're wondering what is, you can actually come in here, view a PDF of the invoice, and know exactly what the client is looking at while you're talking to them. If you have the security, you can actually, from this screen, check these invoices and email the selected invoices to the client. So if for some reason they're saying they've never seen this invoice and they would like to, you can say, well, would you mind if I email it to you? Check this, email selected invoices to the client, and off they go. We can also see a list of their payments. So if they're claiming they made a payment a couple of days ago, we can see if we've actually recorded that payment yet. And again, right below that, you're going to see some credit control notes like we saw on the CRM screen. From your perspective, those are probably the most useful fields in this accounting view, but I'm also going to talk about this pays for and billing receipts briefly. If for some reason this client actually pays for bills on another client, we may see that linked record here. The billing and receipts by month is actually going to show us how much we billed and how much we received every month. This may be useful to you, but from a sales perspective, it's likely going to be more useful to actually see their sales year over year. And we're going to go into that right now. This is kind of an accounting view. If you do have this access, you would be able to see this information. The question is, when I'm emailing an invoice, do I get a list of all contacts to make sure I'm sending to the proper contact? Yes, it's going to default in the billing email address, if there is one, by default. However, it's one of those screens where you can change that or decide to send it to different people. So yes, you can change it, or you can change the email address that the invoice is going to. If for some reason you don't have access to email invoices to a client, it is just a security feature. We would just need to go into the group security and change that so that you would actually have access to that button. I noticed someone said, oh, I did fix that. Sorry, the screen was still paused. So it's a really cool feature. And again, as we do billings going forward, those PDFs will be saved there, and it does make it really easy to shoot that off to a client. So I do like that feature. It's one of the reasons I show this screen. The next view I want to show you, which I think is the most useful of these, is actually this Add Sales view. As I click the Add Sales view, the view is now going to assume I care about what this client has bought. So the first thing I'm going to see here is a breakdown of publications. You can see this one is spending by publication. So I'm actually seeing a breakdown of their spending last year versus this year for each publication. I can also look at a breakdown of last year's versus this year's spending by website. If I find this image useful and I want to use it in a report or to show someone, we actually do have this idea of being able to export this image and save it. These three little lines over here, when I click them, are going to come up with a drop-down where I can print this chart, download it as a JPEG or PNG, and I can actually send it to someone. Next to that, we're actually going to see a breakdown of the print versus digital spending. And this is actually a 3-year comparison. We can see this is year over year. So maybe this is really useful to me in that I can see actually they are doing a lot more digital spending in 2014 than they have been print spending. Maybe we can see some trending in here. There's some other places we can pull this information where we can really export it and dig into it. But what this view was meant to do is give you a snapshot of what's going on with this client and their spending right now versus last year. I always find these visuals to be a lot more helpful than somebody sending me an Excel spreadsheet that I kind of have to dig through for a while. Maybe I do want to do that later and find out why exactly these are different. But right now, I just want to know what's the difference in their spending now versus last year. So I find this view to be really interesting for me. As I scroll down the page, you'll see in this next shutter, we've actually got those totals by year listed out in a line. If I'm now curious as to what is making up these sales, I can drill into them by clicking the year. What I've actually done right there is I was just multitasking. I decided I actually want to keep this window up, but I want to open this report in a new window. You can do that any place in the system by right-clicking on the hyperlink and clicking Open in a new tab. So I'm going to click over to that report that I drilled into. And what you can see is it's now taken 2014, and it's actually broken up the spending by month. Print ad versus digital ad spending. So all I've done is now drill into that, and now I'm looking at a specific year of this client's sales. If I scroll down this page, I've actually got a breakdown of each order that makes up this data at the top. If I'm interested in what this order is actually made up of and I have access to these orders, I can drill into the actual order from here. This order is made up of. I could also choose, if there is a proposal attached to it, to actually see what was on this proposal that this order was a part of, or I could look at the multimedia contract that this order is a part of, all directly from this screen. And again, these are those screens where we were talking about these export options now become a little more useful. If I actually want to just pull all this data out into Excel, all I have to do is click the Excel button, and as you can see, it downloaded directly to my desktop. If there are too many orders to fit on this page, we are going to see this paging mechanism at the bottom again. I can decide to see more orders, if I like, by changing this number, and then I could come to the top and sort these by advertiser, start date, or anything that I find really useful. Now, we're going to look at some other reports in just a moment that kind of show if I want to look at this particular issue or this particular advertiser, but that's really drilling in and running a report that I'm looking for some specific detail. These views are really meant to give you an overarching view of what's going on, and then if I'm curious as to what that's made up of, I can continue to drill. Now, what's important to mention is that we've actually never left this customer screen. We're just in a new view, and I've immediately been able to take a look at their orders from 10,000 feet, and then I was able to drill into those orders by year, and then I was able to drill into each individual order and contract, all from this one view. So we've tried to make it as easy as possible for you to find out what's going on with a client at just a moment's notice. You can see we do have this idea below it of not just totals by year, but here are some print orders that are actually upcoming, and here are some digital orders that are actually upcoming, as well as proposals that might be currently out, or approved, or lost, and what multimedia contracts might be out. So this is one of those things where we can't change a lot of these functions. So it's not super useful if I'm looking to run a report on an issue, which is what we're about to move to. But it is a great way to get a good look at the client and what they're doing right now at this moment. And again, we've never left this client record. We've done all of this from this one place. So this will actually be the first time we're going to go to another screen in the system that is not actually attached to the client's record. We've kind of avoided this navigation bar up here, but what I'm going to do now is go over each one of these drop-downs. So you can see we first got the main menu tab, which is actually going to take us right back to the Elan opening screen. The next thing we're going to see is a CRM Managers tab. If you're a CRM manager, there is a Manager home screen that we can view. And it will actually contain all the reps that I can view, and all the reps that I have access to, and the actions that are coming up. This Home tab is just going to contain the CRM home screen, which we spent a little bit of time on today. It's just a way to easily navigate back to it. The next tab we're going to see is this Customer screen. Sorry, I just saw a question come in. It says, in upcoming orders, the publication. Let's see, I'm going to flip back to that screen so we can see what we're talking about. And in upcoming orders, you're asking, can we add the publication to this screen? We could look at adding that. On the print publication, you can actually see that the publication is listed for upcoming orders. On digital, These are actually digital campaigns. So these campaigns could actually contain multiple orders or multiple line items. If we actually click into one of these campaigns, you would see the breakdown of what is in that campaign. So for print, we do have the publication listed on that screen. But for digital, we actually allow you to drill into that campaign. Sorry, so right here you can see for print, we do have the publication listed. For digital, you actually would have to drill into the campaign. Okay? So the next drop-down we were about to go over is this customers drop-down. And we've talked a little bit about the customer search screen today, and I'm sure most of you have already used this. This is the first time we're actually going to see it. In the customer search screen, earlier I talked a lot about this search only my database. So here you can see where this is going to come into play. If I'm searching for something, I can actually click this button, and it's only going to look through my contacts when we're searching. So it's really easy to get to. We've tried to make it as obvious as possible off to the side because I do feel like it's a very useful tool. As far as the search screen goes, this bar up here is really what I consider like your Google. I can type almost anything into this, and it's going to start looking for that. So I can type in the company name, the ID, the brand name, or a contact's name, and click Go. So I'm going to just search the contact we've been looking at all day. So it is. And you can see it's returned me some results. We've also got the idea of this history tab again. It keeps showing up over the system, so for some reason I've gone into this screen, but I actually just want to go back into a record. I can navigate to that. From the search screen, if for some reason I have searched for a term that is too general, I can narrow down that search using this advanced criteria. None of this is necessary, but it could be helpful. If I search for a company that is very common in the system, I may come up with too many records and I may get an error. That number of records is determined by a setting in the back of the system. I think by default it's something like 300 or 350 records. So if you search for something that has more results than that, it is going to come back and say, hey, please narrow down these results. I'm not sure this is going to be very helpful to you anyways. What we could do then is narrow that down by city, state, phone number, or email. Something that might be useful to us. I know I'm looking for the company that's actually in Texas or Illinois, and that will help narrow down the results. Pretty straightforward. I'm sure you guys use this screen quite a bit, but I did want to make sure we mention where it is in the drop-down.
Brandon, did you see that last question that came in?
Yeah, sorry. Adding the orders to that screen for the digital, I will reach out to them and check. I think that has to do with the fact that a campaign on that screen can actually be linked to multiple publications, and I'm not sure which publication we would want, multiple websites, and I'm not sure which website we would want to display. So I think the idea that it's actually a campaign where that campaign could have different websites attached to it is the reason we're not displaying the actual website name on that screen. So if I made a campaign that actually was selling across 2 or 3 websites, or maybe it has an email blast and a website on it, I'm not sure which one we would want to show. So I think the logic behind that is we've displayed the campaigns that are coming up, and if you'd like to know what those campaigns are made of, you can actually drill into them from that screen. Now, the idea of what digital orders are coming up, there are ways we can look at that in a moment, probably better ways to pull that information up if you're looking for a way to look at what digital orders are coming up for an advertiser. The thing we're about to go over is something called orders for an advertiser, which is probably going to be what you're looking for if you actually want to see what orders are coming up for that advertiser and see the publication. So we're going to go over some reports that are a little more useful with some of these questions. That screen is really, it's kind of set up to just get a snapshot of what's going on. Does that make sense? Okay. So we will now click the Add Account button. Try not to bore you too much with the details on this page. It's pretty straightforward. Adding an account name, addresses, city, state, zip, phone number, fax, website. One of the things we've been talking about today is the idea of adding an agency or a brand to a record. If you have the security, while you're adding a new account, that information should show up right below this general account information. It's one of the things that it's going to be added back in, should be done by the end of this week, I would think. For some reason, it disappeared in this version, and it needs to come back. So, Zach, for the person we were demonstrating this to the other day, right below this, if your security allows you to edit brands or agencies, right below this, there should be a screen that actually allows you to create a new brand or add an agency to this record. Okay? You don't need a lot of information to create an account in the system. An account name and an email address, or an account name and an address is all you really need. The idea behind that is that may be the only information we have. With that said, you may have some business rules that say we really don't want to add an account to this database unless we have an address or unless we have a phone number. But you can create a record with very minimal information now. So the next thing under this drop-down that we're going to go over, My Database. We've talked a lot about how to get things into My Database today. And I was telling you earlier that there was a way to sort your contacts that might be useful. So this is the first one we're going to talk about. And what this is this is actually a list of contacts in my database. I obviously have not been working very hard. I don't have very many contacts in my database, but we will start with this short list. It'll make things a lot quicker. At the top is actually a search or a sort filter. I can actually click these filters and put a little bit of logic behind these and then give it some criteria in this box. So for instance, if I was about to send an email to all of my clients, I might want to only see clients that actually have an email. Sorry, I'm going to use website here. Email is not displayed. So I'm going to click this box, and I'm going to scroll down and say I want all these records that are not empty. And you can see what it's done is it's sorted out the one record that does not have a website. So now I've got a list of clients that just have websites. Okay. I want to clear that filter. At the top here, you can see I do have a no filter, and it'll bring back all my records. Earlier, we were talking about a way to actually prospect clients if I'm going on a business trip and I want to find other clients that are in the area that maybe I should see. This is probably the best tool to do that from. So if, for instance, I was traveling to Illinois, I could come in here and I could say, I want to see this field when it contains the state code Illinois is equal to Illinois. I could also say when the city is equal to the city I'm going to. And it's going to sort my contacts by this filter I've just applied. What may be even more useful is there is this column over here that says next action date. So if I have set up a to-do action based on one of these clients, when that to-do action is scheduled would actually show up right over here. So what that helps me do is actually, if I've sorted this list by Illinois, I may actually only want to see my active clients. This next action date may help me sort my active clients. So I can actually start to create a list of clients who I'm actively talking to within a city, state, or region. Once I've got my list created, I need to select the records that I actually want to export. I can do that by either checking this box at the top, which will check all, or I can check individual records that I would like to get out. Once I've done that, I can click this Export Selected Rows Only to Excel, and what it's going to do is go in and find the rows that I've selected and drop them down to my desktop in an Excel spreadsheet. Okay? So this tool is a little general in what it does, but it's very powerful depending on how creative you get with it. We're going to get into a tool next that is infinitely more flexible, but that also means it's a little more complicated. So I'd like to show you this My Database first because it's the simplest tool and one of the easiest to use. So if you can see some simple tasks that are part of this report, this is the one I see people using the most because I can really just come in here and throw in a sort and get out my list really quickly. Okay? Any questions on this My Database report? I know someone yesterday actually was using this report for exactly what we just talked about. Said when she went on trips, she would sort this by the city she was going to or the state, and then she would sort it by the next actions date and export all of those contacts she had actions with, and then she would follow up with those clients and see if she could actually schedule meetings with them while she was in town. So I think that's a really useful way to use this. Okay? All right. The next tool we're going to talk about on this is My Lists. Now, this is the tool I was just mentioning, is infinitely more flexible, but it does mean it can be a little bit more complicated. So we're going to take a little bit of time and try to go through this piece by piece. You can see here I've actually got some lists created. Once I've created a list, I can come back to it at any time, select that list, and it will actually display the data in this area below. If I come back to this and I actually want to refresh this data, meaning that when I run this report, it is actually going to stay stagnant until I come back and tell it to update. So if I did a prospecting report in January, or if I did a report based on my current clients in January, I may not want that to update immediately as I come into the screen in February. Maybe I want to dump out my January report and then dump out my February report separately. So this last refreshed item here is going to tell me the last time this report was run. You can see I actually ran this report yesterday. If I wanted to get this new data, what I would do is simply refresh the data. It's going to warn me that I will lose this data below. Click OK. And it's going to go out and pull in any new records. Now, there were no new records in this list between today and tomorrow, so it has stayed at the same amount. As I create lists, you can create as many lists as you'd like. If I get tired of a list being here, I can just delete it. We kind of demonstrated what this little part does here. We're actually going to go into a list. We're going to start with a CRM list. As we've gone over mostly CRM activities today, this one will be most related to what we've talked about. When I click Create a New CRM List, the first thing I'm going to see, or maybe not see, is actually this light blue bar at the top. I constantly miss naming these. And when you get down to the bottom of this, if you click Save, it's going to tell you it can't save because you haven't given it a name. So I do make a deal out of seeing this light blue box. For some reason, I miss it all of the time, but you do have to click in here and actually give this list a name. So we're just going to do CRM list. And we're going to scroll down and talk about some of the fields we can add to this. The first thing we're going to see on this list is for what sales reps do I want to create this list. If I only have access to myself, I am going to be the only sales rep listed here. If I have access to multiple reps, they will all be listed here. Okay? I am just going to add some people to this report. I may not get any data back on this when we finish it, but we're just going to add some people to it. I can multi-select this field. Simply by holding down the Shift key on my keyboard, I can select multiple items. I can also hold down Control on my keyboard and select individual items. Those navigation controls are just like you would find in Word or Excel. Once I've selected a record, I can add it individually using the single arrow in the middle. Or if I'd like to just add all of the records over here, I can use the double arrow and add all records at once. Zach brought up a question. Are you guys seeing any lag in my mouse motion and what I'm talking about? Are you able to actually see what I'm doing, or is it behind?
It's behind.
It's behind? Okay. It may be a little confusing. If you guys actually stay in the meeting, I'm just going to close it out real quick and hop back in, and it shouldn't kick any of you off the call. Okay?
Oh, actually, you know what? I can relog in. Did you send it? Oh, here we are.